those of us in the group got together and we started doing a series of investigations. And the way we did that is I had about 50 patients that I had videotaped everything, the preoperative evaluation, the pre-surgery endoscopy, the laparoscopic surgery, and the transoral fundoplication. And then I blinded those. I cut down the videos so that it would be easy to see. And we started looking at things like, is it bigger with IV sedation and is it bigger with general anesthesia? Because you had half the people saying, oh yeah, it's going to be bigger anesthesia, general anesthesia, and half the people saying, no, if they're breathing, it's going to accentuate the hiatal defect and that's a better measurement. So when we blinded the raters to whether it was IV sedation or general anesthesia, what we found is in 43% of the time, the Hill grade assignment appeared larger when we did it under IV sedation. In other words, this seemed to more fully distend the stomach into the hiatal defect so it was measurable. Now, some of the times they did find that the cases were larger under general anesthesia than IV sedation, but we felt like this was the more accurate number. 43% of the cases, it was larger under IV sedation. So we decided at that point that all of our assessments would be done under IV sedation. The next thing we looked at was whether or not we all agreed. In other words, if I had 50 videos and a fourth of them were Hill 1, a fourth of them were Hill 2, a fourth of them were Hill 3, and a fourth of them were Hill 4, and we blinded you to them, could you rate those the same as everybody else? And what we found is nobody agreed on anything. Okay, the agreement was poor. It got to fair or moderate, moderate in 29%. But then when we analyzed, okay, if we want to repair Hill 3s and 4s and not Hill 1s and 2s and just see what's the breakoff, it was only about a 50-50 agreement, which was as good as flipping a coin. So what we realized is what one person's Hill criteria was, let's say Hill 3 criteria, the next person might call that a Hill 2, or they might call it a Hill 4, and there was no rhyme or reason as to which one they would pick. And then the other thing we noticed is, okay, let's say we found a pretty good sized defect on endoscopy, and then we did a pre-laparoscopic endoscopy to be sure that there wasn't any increase in their esophagitis, that things looked the same. And it seemed like they weren't the same, that when we did the endoscopy just before laparoscopic hiatal hernia repair, these hiatal hernias didn't seem as big. And then we would do the surgery and be like, no, this looks pretty big. This looks like it has to be repaired. So we did the same study as we took the videos and we compared them to the IV sedation endoscopies, the videos of surgery to the IV sedation endoscopies, and said, well, is this something you would repair or not repair? And interestingly enough, in 22%, the Hill grade that had been assigned by endoscopy was smaller than the expected Hill grade when we looked at things laparoscopically. And then when we divvied them up into, okay, the decision point is between Hill 2 and Hill 3, how many times do they grade it a Hill 2, meaning no repair was needed, but when they looked at it by laparoscopy, they said, oh yes, this absolutely has to be repaired, which is Hill grade 3. And it turned out to be 11%. So I started thinking about that a little bit because, you know, our failure rate was hovering around 20%. And I thought, well, if half the time we're making the wrong judgment on hiatal repair, then that would account for 50% of our failures.